5 promises. We will halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the boats. Those are the people's priorities. They are your government's priorities, and we will either have achieved them or not.
Well, let's take a look at how those 5 pledges are actually going.
Grow the economy.
Start with breaking news on the economy. Ed's here, morning.
We've just had the latest revision to GDP numbers come through.
Yep.
And there's been no revision.
Oh.
So some people thought maybe we might, you know, the Office of National Statistics might change their view of how fast the economy was growing or rather shrinking, because remember, the last 2 numbers were negative. That meant that we were in recession. A lot of people thought maybe we might officially be out of recession today. I'm afraid to say we're not.
And it gets worse. After his spring budget, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt couldn't wait to tell us all this.
The OBR says because of the decisions that I've taken, GDP will be 0.7% higher than it would otherwise have been.
But what the Chancellor failed to mention is the same report also says this. We continue to expect that Brexit will reduce the UK's potential GDP by 4% in the long run by lowering the trade intensity of the economy. That's right, whilst the Chancellor ecstatically tells us this,
GDP will be 0.7% higher than it would otherwise have been.
The OBR are saying in the same report that the hard Brexit championed by the Prime Minister will reduce the UK's potential GDP by 4% in the long run by lowering the trade intensity of the economy. And if that's not bad enough, the utter insanity of this government's management of the economy can be found in this from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
There's a problem here, isn't there? Without this level of immigration, we'd have no functioning health service. The social care sector would be even more of a disaster zone than it is. I mean, you can say that you're going to do all these things, but there is a cost here. Hospitality would become a wasteland. Are you saying that come what may, even if employers begin to struggle and your promise of growth gets torpedoed because nobody can find anybody to do the work, that you're going to bring down the numbers come what may?
I'm not just saying this, Trevor. I'm telling you that we have a plan to make sure that this is the case.
Heaven help us.
Reduce debt.
Well, so far, and despite Sunak's repeated claims to the contrary, this hasn't happened. Debt is not currently falling. In fact, Sunak's government has given us the highest debt in 60 years. On the measure of debt that the government itself uses for its own targets, it would be completely untrue to say that debt is actually falling.
Cut waiting lists.
Well, the waiting list has actually gone up from 7.2 million when Sunak made his speech to 7.6 million on the latest data available. And if that's not bad enough, an absolutely shocking new study has just found that more than 250 patients a week may have died in England last year due to long waits in accident and emergency for a hospital bed.
In 2023, NHS England data showed more than 1.5 million patients waited 12 hours or more in major emergency departments, while 65% of these patients in A&E were waiting for a hospital bed. The Royal College of Emergency Medicine estimates more than 250 patients a week may have died in England last year due to long waits in A&E, like we've been saying, for that hospital space. Well, let's get more. Daniel's been taking a look at these figures for us. What more do they tell us?
Well, they tell us that families are losing people before their time because they've been waiting for so long in A&E that the death risk, as they put it, increases. They've worked out that for if you're in hospital for 5 hours or more, after that, that's where the risk really starts to kick in. And that's important because the NHS aim is to respond to people within 4 hours. This report has worked out that 14,000 people died in 2023 because they were waiting for a bed. And when you hear those numbers, you just think it's just incredible that's the problem, that people are not being seen quickly enough by the emergency services when people need them.
We will halve inflation.
Well, ironically, the only pledge the Prime Minister has had no control over is the only one he's been able to meet.
Inflation has fallen to 3.4% from its peak over 11%, down by almost 70%. The steepest fall since the 80s and now at the lowest level since September 2021.
Let's just sit on a shelf for a moment that it was this government that helped give us the highest inflation in 40 years in the first place, in part due to its incompetent management of the UK economy. When inflation started to accelerate in early 2022, then Chancellor Rishi Sunak couldn't wait to attribute the rise to global factors. Now he's actually claiming it as a success for government policy that it's come down.
These figures show that our plan is working.
By now, even Larry the Cat knows the job of cutting inflation is for the Bank of England. So any suggestion the government is responsible for it falling just insults the public's intelligence.
And stop the boats.
The Prime Minister has made this one of his top priorities.
Stop the boats, stop the boats, stop the boats.
So how's that going?
Grim reading for Downing Street. Here are the numbers for the first 3 months of this year from the Home Office, and they show boat crossings at a record high. 4,644 people made the crossing in the first 3 months of this year, January to March. That's 23% higher than last year when it was just 3,770, and 12% higher than in 2022, which was the year that small boat arrivals were at their very highest. So not looking good. So much for stopping the boats.
We will either have achieved them or not.